Welcome to the Jones Zone, a podcast by Darryl and JJ Jones.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us for this great show. Today, I'm so privileged and so happy to have Ryan Marshall. He's the founder and CEO of Equity Protect. So you've probably seen a lot of those commercials on television talking about people scamming people out of their house, out of their title, protecting your title, the criminals going after that. And Ryan is just brilliant. And I'm just going to let Ryan take over. Ryan, tell us more about what it is you did and what kind of caused you to develop this company.
Thanks, Darryl, for having me. So I have kind of a unique background. Obviously, we go back, I don't know, probably about 25 years.
Yeah. You and
when I actually started selling real estate out of my car, believe it or not, if you remember that, in a Mazda 323. And for whatever reason, I had just a genuine passion about real estate in general. And as you know, I started down there in Newport Beach. Probably about 2 years into that, I decided that it would be, the next evolution would be to open up a mortgage company. And so I co-founded a company called directlender.com. And that was right around Y2K, if you kind of remember that. It was like way when internet was like a new thing. And our tagline was buy a house with your mouse. So I did that for a period, I don't know, probably about 3 or 4 years. And then I ended up starting a wholesale mortgage company, which that was the next evolution, right? Be a lender, right? Not a mortgage broker, you have to be a lender. And so for a period from 2004 until 2008-ish, I did wholesale lending, and I did it in 38 states. We had brick and mortar in about a dozen of them. And, I really was able to sink my teeth into real estate, right? Where it was, the retail side of it, it was the wholesale side of it, it was the title side of it, which is important, right? And it was also really the beginning stages of starting to gauge real estate fraud, right? As a whole, because real estate fraud, it isn't, just being a nuisance that somebody wants to commit a crime, right? There's a financial gain that is obviously attributed to the motivation. And so in 2008, when it was, everybody kind of went through that financial crisis, we ended up shutting down the wholesale company entirely. And I ended up becoming an expert witness for various newly founded Department of Mortgage Lendings across the country, attorney generals, et cetera. And really the focal point was going after people that committed fraud, right? Back then it was more or less around mortgages, right? It was, straw buyers, it was, rent skimming, right? I mean, there's all of these other kind of attributes or components where they were trying to take advantage of the lender. And so since then, there's been a tremendous amount of advance with, improving laws and, oversight and all that kind of fun stuff. And so now the fraudsters have just decided, hey, there's another easy way, right? There's another easy target.
When I was talking to Ryan about this, I thought it was pretty clever. You said, yeah, all those fraudsters were thrown in jail and now they've been released the last few years and now they're doing this. But go ahead, right. I'm sorry.
But right after 2008, I ended up starting a data company, right? I swore to myself I would never get back into this business. Never again, right? After all the things that you saw, I would never get back into the business. And so I learned how to write software. I started a data company. And from 2010 until December of 2021, I decided that I would be in the data and the technology business. And so that was awesome, right? I have all of the experience in real estate and technology at the time, just kind of happened to be at the right place at the right time. And I ended up selling that company to a public company. And I was then kind of courted by some title executives, right? And they kind of said, hey, are you aware, right? Have you been, watching TV? Are you, is this an issue, right? And so I quickly kind of dove into the issue. Again, being in real estate, mortgage, I totally get it. Fraud, common thing. As a real estate broker, you're kind of like, yeah, I don't know, right? I don't know. Somebody's going to steal your house, really? And so, so after about 2 weeks, they asked me to do kind of a deep dive on another company to see if there was some, there.
I think we should clarify another company, meaning those commercials that we see on TV, right? That swear to protect you from thieves coming in and taking title of your house. Okay, go ahead.
That's right.
Sorry.
That's right. You kind of look at it, you're like, yeah, I don't know, right? And so after you start actually really taking a deep dive into the crimes themselves, it's not necessarily going down to the county recorders and just simply changing a deed and re-recording it, right? I mean, there's a financial element and a financial gain that has to occur. And so kind of taking all of the experience that I had from the mortgage side of it, from the real estate side of it, and then also we had a title captive and a settlement company, right? You kind of start to take all of that experience. You're like, well, there are some real vulnerabilities in this business. How can we safeguard it, right? I mean, there has to be a way where we could safeguard all of these, penetration points that may not be known yet, but they will soon be, given all of the attention on the issue.
And let me add too, if I understand this correctly. So when people do, and maybe we're not at that point yet, but a crime's not necessarily committed till there's a financial gain. Is that fair to say, or no?
Well, in some states that is true.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean,
Okay.
they do have some and laws are being changed, which we can talk about here in a second on how we
Okay.
are behind a lot of the legislation in probably about a half a dozen states right now. But the laws are very, very loose and they are not specific around these particular crimes itself, right? And so looking at all of the different penetration points, I spent the greater part of 6 months teaming up with, at that point, was the exiting chief legal officer for a large a title insurance underwriter who is now the leading partner for Alta. And we designed a brand new process, a brand new document called a notice to restrict voluntary conveyance. Now you think about it and you're like, wow, a whole lot of, alphabet soup words for really just making the current owner, right, a lien holder or somebody that has to give permission in order to pass clear title, right? And so we spent 6 months going back and forth, trying to solicit everything that we could from the major underwriters, from real estate attorneys, from brokers, from lenders, right? We wanted to make sure that, if it was an FHA loan, last day of the month, you had to close, right? We wanted to make sure that we didn't unnecessarily cloud title and there would be another, 30 days of interest that, that potentially could be accrued. And so after kind of figuring out how could we do it, then it was really, you had to get to work to figure out how could we do it safely, right? And so we designed a brand new application, which is a servicing technology that basically services the liens to guarantee that the homeowner isn't going to unnecessarily cloud title. And so, it goes from doing the title curative work initially, making sure that we have the lawful owner, all the way to, making sure that when we do file the lien, it's done appropriately, and making sure that after the fact, in the event that there is any potential issue, we also have insurance that covers everybody in the process.
Yeah, I thought you brought up a good point, because it's kind of like when people do a credit lock and be like jumping through hoops trying to get that unlocked. So you're also avoiding that type of scenario as well.
That's exactly right.
All right.
Yeah. So really what we are just like a multi-factor authentication tool. So you basically, you create a stake in the ground, you declare that you are the person that has to provide permission for all subsequent transactions in the future. And then we basically do everything else. So then when somebody actually looks up title, they're going to say, hey, there's something there, right? They have to deal with this particular lien. And so that person who wants to have access puts in a very simple token into our website. They register. We make sure that they're, obviously licensed and in good standing, or the consumer could do it also, right, on their behalf. They enter the token into our platform, and then we immediately notify the owner. And we say, hey, are you selling your property? Are you refinancing your property, right? And then given, on the mobile app, if you have the app downloaded, or you get an email, go into our website and you say, yes, I am selling my property. And then that authorizes an immediate document to the person who requested it, basically unlocking your title for that purpose only, right? And so, I mean, that's essentially what we have done to really safeguard the industry, making sure that all fraud, right, real estate fraud, is, managed the best way that humanly possible.
Kind of talk about what they were doing or what people are trying to do, because first we would see those commercials, my wife and I'd go, yeah, I don't know, honey. They would have to have an escrow officer, a title rep, a notary. And I
No.
even had said that to you prior to our podcast here, and you explained to me in a way that I had no idea, because I thought we
Yeah.
would have to have a gang of people colluding together, which would make it far more challenging to do. But you explained to me, like you did the other day, about what they're doing.
We do our best not to educate the general public because, again, we're going to make no. I'm going to give you some, but we do our best not to educate the general public. With that being said, a lot of these things you'll be able to see in the news now, right? As the crimes evolve. And so some of the things that you're now seeing as things evolve. So right now, people are targeting, obviously, senior citizens. So let's go back. That's actually a really good point, right? So what Equity Protect does, which is different than anyone else that you're going to see in the industry, we identify the high risk properties that are out there, right? And we educate the general public if you're low risk or medium risk, right? Just so you know, hey, you don't necessarily need to go and subscribe to a service for alerts, right? If there really is no reason to do so, right? Or there's no reason to subscribe to our service either. And so we really wanted to make sure that our first mission was to educate people. And so what that means is I get a phone call about 2 weeks ago. So I'm the overflow, right? So it'll go through our sales staff. It'll go through Ruby. For whatever reason, Ruby doesn't pick up the call. I get the phone on my cell phone. So here I am on a Saturday night. It's probably about 8 o'clock. So 8, 9. So it's 11 o'clock in Florida. And I get a call from a woman and she says, hey, I am scared that somebody's going to steal my home. I'm like, okay, fair enough. And you could tell that she was a mature adult, right? She was a mature citizen. And so we start talking. And so I quickly look her up on Title Toolbox, and you realize that she acquired the property about 35 years ago. She's had 2 reverse mortgages done on her property. She's at about 125% loan to value. And she's telling me that she's losing sleep because she thinks her home's going to be stolen, right? So she has no risk, right? There's nothing to extort her for, right?
She should hope that somebody takes it.
Yeah,
I'm just kidding.
Right. No,
she owes more
but
than
that's the truth, right? So about 50% of the people that come to us are at low risk, right? And we advise them, hey, we're happy to enroll you into a preventative monitoring service that we do complimentary. But really, there's no reason to subscribe for our premium service because there really isn't going to be a financial crime unless you really, really want to, which we've had a few people that have done it. There really isn't a reason to do it. And these are the reasons why, right? Now, if you're high risk, right? People that don't have mortgages, or if they have low LTVs, right? If they're non-owner occupied, if they're in vacation areas, right? Where VRBO, Airbnb, some, hot pads, some of these other, things where you see vacation rentals that have, a little less, oversight on them because they're using online platforms to try to rent their properties out, right? Not a property manager. It's those types of things, people that, are elder, they're older, right? We have a lot of the mature adults that, they're financial crimes, they seem to be a vulnerable generation. And so they're being targeted, right? We also go as far as looking at, has your financial information been compromised on the dark web? Now, it's not just financial information. We're specifically looking for mortgage information where it could show that you had a very low balance, right? It could show that we could find ways where we could create a mortgage satisfaction, right? Or a reconveyance. So, again, the crimes are evolving where people understand now the process and what they have to do to get there. So an example, that we're right now seeing is, a more mature person is listed on a court website, right? They go into conservatorship and they know that they're probably close to their EOL, right? And so
you used to explain the acronyms. Possibly everybody
end of life.
Okay.
End of life, right? So I mean, again, they're starting to now. They need to manage, some of their affairs before they pass on. So they go into conservatorship, which is all public records, right? And somebody who knows what they're doing will look for those particular court case records. They'll identify properties that either don't have a mortgage or they're at low LTV, and they'll record a mortgage, right? Mortgage gets mailed back to maybe a transposed address, right? And they'll wait on it, and they'll sit on it for potentially 6 months, maybe a year, maybe 2 years. And after that person passes away, that property, as you know, will go into a probate, right? It'll go into some type of some type of court conservatorship probate, and
or even a trust. A trust, the heirs get it.
Yeah,
and they're
that's
not going to
exactly right.
know. They're not going to know what mortgages they took
That's
out.
right.
There's no. I mean, why would they?
That's exactly right. And so, right, they get to the point where we're going through probate. They submit a demand. They now extorted the estate, $50,000, $100,000, $200,000, $250,000, and right, it unseen, right, out of mind, out of sight, right. You don't know, and not only that, but it's very difficult to fight because how do you know if that person did or didn't take out a loan? That example that I'm sharing with you right now was exactly what happened on Elvis Presley's estate, right, at Graceland. That just happened. I think it happened about a year ago. That exact same scenario.
Yeah, you were telling me about that. I hadn't heard that in the news.
Yeah.
They tried that with his estate.
Yeah. And so now what Equity Protect does, so as we evolve with the crimes, right, we actually, as part of our preventative complementary monitoring service, we go through those exact same records that a fraudster would be going through. We identify the high risk candidates and we let them know. So if you're subscribed to our service, we're going to let you know, right? Hey, this just increased your risk assessment level from a medium to a high because of these events, right? We see you on Facebook Marketplace, you're on Craigslist, whatever it is, we now notify the general consumer, this is now increasing your risk. And did you do it? That's the question, right? Was this intended? And so, another thing that you're seeing right now, properties that are owned by LLCs or trusts, we'll do the LLC as an example first. People are finding properties that are owned by corporations. They're going to the Secretary of State website and they're checking to see if the status of that LLC or that corporation is valid, right? Is it an active status? And if it's not an active status, how hard is it to make it an active status, even if you're not an officer of that corporation, right? Download an application, fill it out, send it to the Secretary of State, AFE, reinstate the company. How do they know, right? And so, that has now happened in a couple of the counties that we're working directly with. That's exactly what they're doing. And now, if you're getting title insurance or if you're going through a traditional, sale or refinance, how do you know that you're not dealing with a fraudster, right? When they have all of the valid information that they need in order to conduct the transaction. And so, very similarly, you see with trust, people sometimes will call in now and they'll say, oh, well, we're in a trust, we're protected. None of that information is public. How hard is it to generate a trust, do a certification of trustee, right? And do a refinance and a sale? I mean, how hard is it?
I had talked about this because I thought to myself, because I've had to deal with a lot of people that had trust. I did my own trust, of course. My father's done a trust, et cetera, et cetera. And I thought to myself, because it's always, hey, you got to find your trust. We need a copy of your trust. And right. I would think there would be a place to register a trust in a particular right. county or state. And I was just baffled that that's not the case, because you're exactly right. What's going to prevent someone from just drawing up their own trust after the fact and saying, hey, here's the trust. It amazed me.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. And so, I mean, these are things that you could find in the news today. So that's why I'm a little bit more, open about sharing how these crimes are evolving. But they've gotten extremely sophisticated, right? With the introduction of AI, with big data, large learning, language learning models, where now they can actually start to scale up and start to create patterns. Where now, I mean, we're talking about kind of a macro element for people to go out and kind of go one by one, two by two. So we also leverage LLMs now in order to do all of our risk assessments, right? And I'm now monitoring, or I'm now helping specific counties target high risk people. And I just ended up flipping one over to this was Douglas County, Nevada, yesterday or the day before, where we identified this was an LLC that was recently revoked. So it was revoked within the last year or so. They acquired the property back in 2020. Out of state owner, no loan, vacant land, right? we found the property on a large a for sale hunting website, right? And we noticed that the phone number and the owner that was placed on there was a different phone number than the phone number that was originally listed when it was acquired, right, back with the title company. And so anyway, we notified the county. The county ended up notifying the owner, and the owner said, "Yeah, I'm not selling my property." So we were able to. I mean, again, but it's if we could do it, anyone. I mean, there's other people that are out there doing it for a more mischievous, intent, not trying to safeguard people, but actually pull the crime off. So, so all of these different elements, there's now large learning models that are scouring, and they're finding different penetration points that we have to be mindful of and that we have to guard against. And right now, Equity Protect as a preventative service is really the only thing that would safeguard you.
Wow, this is this is just fascinating stuff, and it's interesting because we had talked about some of those, I guess you can call them secret ways or things that you don't want the public to know. And I appreciate you not mentioning them, but I can tell the audience that it's pretty creative and pretty ingenious. I mean, obviously for nefarious reasons. Once you had mentioned that to me, I thought, oh my goodness, you're right. Yeah. You don't need to have a escrow officer, a notary, and a title person involved in this stuff. You just have to be a pretty sharp software crook.
Yeah. Well, I mean, not only that. So there's another example down close to you, Coronado. Is a serviceman area, right? So again, there's not to mention kind of what they're doing in that general area, but a gentleman walks into a credit union, right? He has a driver's license. Let's say that his name was, Jose Mendoza, right? And very common name. Walks into the credit union and opens up a checking account. Tells the clerk where he lives, right? So as he's filling out his information, obviously he's targeting a serviceman who has been deployed, right? Walks into the credit union, opens up a checking account, gives the address, and while he's in there, he says, "Oh yeah, would you like to open a HELOC?" Right? It looks like you have a fair bit of equity in your property. Would you like to open a HELOC? And of course, right? Guy says, "Oh yeah, right? Why not?" Right? And so again, he has real credentials. He has a valid driver's license. He has all of the valid information. How do you know that he isn't the exact same Jose Mendoza that owns that property? Right?
Wow.
He gets a $250,000 equity line against the property. They deposited it in his account. 2 weeks later, he's gone. He's gone.
Oh my goodness! And so another thing I wanted, and not to be redundant, but a lot of those companies that do claim, you mentioned something when we spoke yesterday, the day before yesterday, about how a lot of those companies that claim to protect you, all they do is alert you after it's done.
Yeah. So again, we do our best. We don't speak poorly about anyone else in the business, right? I mean, again, they're doing what they can or what they could have done before us to kind of safeguard people. But truth be told, there are companies out there that collect a fee from you, or alternatively, you can oftentimes go to your county. So depending on where you are in the country, you could register your name and your property. So you get alerts only after something gets recorded. Right. So the damage is done. Right. So the problem with that particular mechanism is, it's not a preventative tool. It's a recovery. Hey, if we could get to it soon enough, we might be able to recover something, find out who did it, where did they go. It really is an after the fact solution where you're still faced with doing a quiet title action, unwinding the transaction, going to court, having what we call a duty to defend and all of the fees, right? Even if there is an insurance company that was part of the transaction on the buyer side, the owner that the crime was committed against isn't on that policy. So keep that in mind. If a purchase happens, you're not listed on the new title policy between the fraudster buyer, right? Or the fraudster seller and the new buyer, right? The buyer's covered, but not the person that the crime was committed against. And so So that's another reason why our liens are so effective, is because now we're putting a stake in the ground and our lien becomes part of that new title policy, right? Regardless. And so it really does kind of provide that latch mechanism that really is important to make sure that everybody is covered.
It's similar to something I had heard. This is now coming to my mind, to where if, for example, somebody did own their $1 million property free and clear, they would want to, and tell me if this is correct or not, but they'd almost want to record a debt to themselves for 10 grand, whatever. And just so they know that they have to get notified for, because when any HELOC is done, is the first, this is kind of naive, I probably should know this, is the first notified when a HELOC is done? No.
So unless they're getting subordinated, they're not notified.
So you'd want to do if you were doing that scenario that I mentioned, you'd want to try to max it out to leave as little equity as possible, not 10,000.
No, 10,000 still requires another set of eyes. So it's still going to require a title company. Now, the challenge though is, which we do recommend. So some people, and these kinds of tools have been used, right, in the past, which is part of our thesis in creating the service. The challenge though is what happens if you die? What happens? There's a tax element that's associated with it, right? Who is the beneficiary of it, right? There's so many things. So there's so many things to really be mindful of, where $8 a month that we charge is pretty inexpensive for $1 million policy.
Yeah. No doubt.
Trust attorneys and people they do family planning. This has been used in the past, where they make the beneficiaries of whoever the beneficiaries are for that estate the beneficiaries of a mortgage, and they do that, right? I mean, and that is something that we do recommend. You don't have to subscribe to our service. We're really trying to educate you on what you can do to safeguard your home.
But then you're, like you brought up though, there are potential tax consequence.
Yeah. Or you have disputes, but you have disputes with people in the family. Yeah, there's a whole lot of things why we're starting to gain notoriety with a lot of those trust and those family planning attorneys and law practices, because it really is a perfect solution, and we offer insurance that covers off any financial crime that could occur going forward, right? Which is pretty powerful.
So now, you were telling me that you're working with title companies. Do you work with the state attorneys as well, or not really?
So I'm glad you brought that up. So we are in the process of we're working with 3 states right now to change legislation that requires preventative title solutions for real estate fraud at the county recorder or the deed of register level, right? So right now they're working on changing the laws to change some of their technology fund definitions to include an amount that could pay for our service for every constituent in the county. And so, yes, we are working with the attorney generals, the secretary of states, the local officials, a lot of the recorder associations also. We've been very vocal on trying to come up with a solution to safeguard every person in the country.
Yeah, I was just going to say, this could be something applicable for every state.
Yeah, 100%.
This has just been absolutely fascinating. And I tell you, I was so excited, especially after we talked. And it is a good thing you didn't disclose what the crooks are doing, but I can verify that what they're doing is something that you need to talk to Ryan about, because his company that he's formed is necessary and becoming more and more necessary for the reasons you stated, with AI and all the tools out there for the crook. So if somebody did want to get a hold of you, Ryan, what's the best way? Is it a website, email, or number? You tell us.
Yeah. So the best way to get a hold of me would be going to the website. So it's www.equityprotect.com. Super simple. And then from there, if you wanted to get a hold of me, I monitor all of the support emails at the moment. So it would be support@equityprotect.com. And I get every single one of those emails, making sure that, we fulfill our mission.
And look at you. I can't help but notice the background of where you're at right now. And you're living well right now.
Yeah. Life has been good.
Life is good. So, all right. Well, thank you so much for joining us here on the Jones Zone. And it sounds like I'm probably going to see you next week for lunch, hopefully, with Big Wayne.
I'm flying down.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. And please visit his website. This is really important information. So take care and stay tuned for our next episode, or look for one of our previous episodes. We've got a lot of great topics out there. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.